ceiling doesn't crack because the drywall is weak. It cracks because something moved. That one fact decides everything. It decides whether your fix lasts 20 years or comes back next winter looking just like it does right now. So before you buy anything, look at the crack. It will tell you what happened. Is the crack a long, clean, straight line? Then a tape seam came apart, or a row of screws lost their grip. Do you see round bumps or little circle cracks in a row across the ceiling? Those are screws pushing out. The crack between them is the ceiling bending. Is the crack messy and uneven? Is there a small dent around it? Does one side sit lower than the other? That's a hit. Someone put a foot or a knee through it from the attic, or something heavy dropped on the floor above. Now here's the one almost everybody gets wrong. Say the crack runs along the line where the ceiling meets a wall, usually a wall in the middle of the house. It opens up in winter, it closes again in summer. That is called truss uplift. Here's what's going on. The top of your roof frame sits in cold, dry attic air. The bottom of it is buried in warm insulation. Those two parts dry out at different rates. So the bottom bends upward every winter, and it pulls your ceiling up with it. Nothing is broken, nothing is failing. But if you fix it like a normal crack and screw it down tight, it will rip itself open again every single year. There are also 3 things that mean stop. Don't fix it yourself. 1, brown or yellow stains, bubbling paint, a musty smell, drywall that feels soft. That's water. Find the leak and fix that first. 2, a ceiling that sags or bows. You can see it dip between the wood. 3, cracks in more than one room, plus doors that suddenly stick, plus cracks near your windows and doors. That's the house moving, not the drywall. Everything after this is for the normal kind. A cracked ceiling with good wood above it. Now, if you can get into the attic above this ceiling, do it. Working from both sides is what makes this a real fix instead of a patch. But first, understand what you're standing on up there. The ceiling below you is 1/2 inch of chalky board and paper. It was never made to hold a person. It will not hold you. And the wood beams are hidden. Loose insulation covers them completely, so you can't see where it's safe to step. Under that insulation, there are also wires and electrical boxes. So bring a piece of plywood up with you. Lay it across 3 or 4 beams. Stand on that. Then move it ahead of you and step onto it again. Leapfrog your way across. Never step between the beams, not even once, not even for a quick step. That is exactly how the ceiling you're fixing got broken. Wear long sleeves, gloves, safety glasses, and a dust mask. Bring a headlamp so both hands stay free. And go up in the morning. Attics can pass 150 degrees in the afternoon. Before any of it, turn off the breaker for the lights and fans in that ceiling. You're about to drive screws into a space you can't see into. There are wires in there. One more thing, and don't skip it. Does your ceiling have a bumpy, sprayed-on texture? Was the house built before about 1985? Then treat it as asbestos until a lab says otherwise. Left alone, it's harmless. Scraping and sanding it is what puts fibers in the air. A test costs about $50. Get it done first. Okay, you're in the attic. Pull the insulation off the damaged spot and look at the top of the drywall. You're checking 3 things. Is the board cracked all the way through or just on the face? Are there screws that miss the wood completely? You'll see them poking up into thin air. And is there a gap between the drywall and the wood? That last one causes a huge number of ceiling cracks. If the board isn't pressed tight to the wood, it can flex. Every flex works the screws loose and pops the tape. Here's what's up there holding your ceiling. The big beams are called joists. They're usually 2x8s or 2x10s. They run one direction across the room. They sit either 16 or 24 inches apart, measured from the middle of one to the middle of the next. In most of the country, the drywall screws right into the bottom of those joists. But in New England, parts of the Midwest, and Canada, you'll find something else. Thin 1x3 boards run across the bottom of the joists, also 16 inches apart. Those are called strapping. The drywall screws into the strapping instead. Strapping does two useful jobs. It evens out beams that are bent or twisted so your ceiling comes out flat, and it leaves a 3/4 inch gap where the electrician can run wire across the room without drilling through every beam, which is exactly why you turned off the power. In a strap ceiling, there is live wire in the space right behind your drywall. A screw that misses the strapping goes straight into that space. So find the wood exactly. Don't guess. From the attic, drill a small hole straight down through the middle of a beam or strap, right above the damage. Use a 3/16 bit. That hole goes through the drywall and shows up in the room below. Now you know where one piece of wood is. The rest are easy. They sit on a grid, 16 or 24 inches apart, all running the same way. Measure over. Mark a line. Then check your work. Drive one screw at the new line. If it bites hard, you're on wood. If it spins, you're not. 2 minutes of checking saves you from a ceiling full of screws that hold nothing. No attic access? Use a strong magnet from below. Drag it across the ceiling. It will snap onto the old screw heads. That shows you the lines and the spacing. Now the big choice. Do you screw the old drywall back up or cut it out and put in new? Cut it out if the chalky center is crumbling. Cut it out if the board is broken clean through. Cut it out if one side of the crack sits lower and won't push back flat. Cut it out if a big area of the paper face is torn off. Here's why. Joint compound is a filler. It is not glue, and it is not structure. It cannot hold two loose pieces of a broken board together. But screw it back up if the board is cracked yet still flat, the center is solid, and the real problem is that it came loose. That's the usual case. And it's honestly the better repair because you're not adding 4 new seams to the middle of your ceiling. To do that right, you have to push the drywall up tight against the wood before you drive any screw. People skip this step. It's the one that matters most. A screw pulls a board toward its head. It does not push a board up. So if there's a gap behind the drywall when you drive that screw, the screw is under strain from that second on. It will pop right back out. Here's the clean way to press it up. Take 2 pieces of 5/8 plywood, a little bigger than the damaged area. Glue and screw them together so the whole thing is stiff. Now bore 1-inch holes through it. Make a row of holes every 3 inches along a line. Then space your rows to match your wood, 16 or 24 inches apart. Hold that plywood up against the ceiling. Line 1 row of holes up over the wood line you found. Then cut a 2x4 a hair longer than the floor to ceiling height. Wedge it between the plywood and the floor. Put a scrap of plywood under it so you don't dent your floor. That brace presses the whole damaged area flat against the wood and holds it there. Now your hands are free. Drive your screws through the holes. Use 1 1/4 inch coarse drywall screws for 1/2 inch board. Use 1 5/8 inch for 5/8 board. Put a dimpler bit in your drill. That's the bit with the collar that stops at the right depth by itself. The right depth is a small dimple. The paper must not tear. If the screw head rips through the paper, that screw now holds nothing at all. Back it out and drive a fresh one 2 inches away. Space your screws 12 inches apart along each piece of wood. Go tighter around the damage, about 7 or 8 inches. and keep every screw at least 3/8 inch away from any edge. If your problem is popped screws instead of a crack, use the same idea. Never just hammer the old nail back in. That hole is already stripped and it won't hold. Drive 2 new screws about 1.5 inches on each side into solid wood. Then pull out or reset the old one. Fill all 3 holes. Now here's the part that makes the fix permanent. A crack that runs between 2 beams has nothing behind it. The 2 halves are bending on thin air. Tape and mud on the front won't stop that, because dried mud is stiff. It can't bend. It can only crack. So give the crack something solid to hold on to. From the attic, run a bead of construction adhesive on top of the drywall, on both sides of the crack. Then cut a piece of 5/8 plywood to fit between the beams. Press it down into the glue. In a strap ceiling, that plywood will sit a little low because it's thinner than the strapping. So tap a few thin wood shims between the beam and the plywood. That forces it down tight against the back of the drywall. Then go back downstairs and run more screws up through your holes into that plywood. Now the crack has solid wood behind it the whole way. The 2 halves physically cannot move apart again. Can't get above the ceiling? Second floor, sloped ceiling, ducts in the way? You can do the same thing from below. Cut a narrow slot along the crack. Slide in strips of plywood with glue on them. Hold them tight against the back. Then screw through the drywall into the strips on both sides. Same idea. Remember truss uplift though. There you do the opposite. Screwing it down harder just guarantees the tear. Instead, set that part free. Pull the screws within about 16 to 18 inches of that wall. Now the ceiling can bend a little instead of ripping. Then cover the joint with crown molding and nail the molding into the wall only, never into the ceiling. The ceiling slides behind it and nobody ever sees a crack again. Now let's finish it. This is where good repairs get ruined. Prep first. Take a utility knife and cut away every loose bit of paper and crumbly mud. Don't just tap it with a hammer. Score lightly around the edge of the damage. That stops you from tearing paper off the good drywall. Is the crack a thin hairline? Open it up into a shallow V. You need real space for mud to fill. A thin smear on the surface has nothing to grab. Then brush and vacuum out the dust. Mud does not stick to dust. Now tape it. Always tape a crack. Filling a crack without tape will fail. Every time. And there's a real answer on which tape to use. Mesh tape is the sticky fiberglass kind. It's easier because it sticks by itself, but it stretches. Testing shows a hairline crack appears after just 1/100th of an inch of movement, and mesh doesn't reach full strength until it's stretched 3 times that far. Paper tape doesn't stretch. You press it into a bed of mud and it locks in place. That's why the makers recommend paper wherever things move. And a ceiling holds its own weight all day, every day, so use paper. If you do use mesh, you must cover it with hot mud, not the pre-mixed kind. That extra strength is what makes up for the stretch. Speaking of mud, for your first coat, use hot mud. Hot mud is a powder you mix with water. The bag says 20, 45, or 90. That number is your working time in minutes. It is not dry time. It gets hard enough to sand at about 1.5 times that number. Hot mud hardens by a chemical reaction, not by drying out. So it works in a cold room. It works in a humid room. It barely shrinks. And it's much stronger than the pre-mixed stuff. Mix it in a clean pan. Old dried bits will make your fresh batch harden early. Spread mud into the crack. Lay the paper tape on top. Press it down with a 6-inch knife. Press firmly so there's only a thin layer under the tape and no air bubbles. But don't press so hard you scrape all the mud out from under it. For coats 2 and 3, switch to pre-mixed mud. Hot mud dries very hard and you will hate sanding it. Second coat, 10-inch knife, wider than the first. Third coat, 12-inch knife, wider again. Each coat should get thinner and thinner at the edges, blending out 8 to 10 inches past the last one. Working over your head, mix your mud a little stiffer. Load a little less on the knife. It's less to catch when it falls. Sand lightly with a sponge or a vacuum sander. Never sand so hard that you expose the tape. Then do the one trick that separates a pro finish from an obvious patch. Hold a bright work light flat against the ceiling so the light shines sideways across the surface. Every ridge, dip, and scratch will throw a shadow. Fix whatever that light shows you, because that's exactly what your room lights will do to it later. Does your ceiling have texture? Match it before you paint, and practice on a piece of scrap or cardboard first, not on the ceiling. For a skip trowel look, thin out pre-mixed mud until it's about like pancake batter. Load about an inch of mud along the edge of a trowel. Hold it at a low angle, maybe 15 or 20 degrees. Now make short passes with almost no pressure so it skips along and leaves gaps between the patches of mud. That's where the name comes from. Then go back over it lightly with a clean, damp trowel to knock down any lumps. Carry the texture out past your repair in random scattered strokes. Otherwise, you'll see a rectangle where new meets old. Then prime it. Do not skip this. Fresh mud soaks up paint much faster than old painted ceiling does, so the paint dries with a different shine and you get a dull halo in the exact shape of your repair. Prime the patch. Let it dry. Then paint the whole ceiling wall to wall in one go. Use flat ceiling paint, always flat on a ceiling. Anything shiny shows off every flaw. And don't try to paint just the patch. It almost never matches. The old paint has yellowed over the years, and a ceiling gets more light across it than any other surface in your house. Do all of that and look at what you've built. The drywall is screwed to real wood. The crack has solid backing so it can't bend. It's covered with tape that doesn't stretch. It's set in mud that doesn't shrink. You checked it with a sideways light, and you sealed it so the paint lies flat across the whole thing. None of that is temporary. That repair will outlast the paint on top of it, and that's how we do it on this channel. Not just the steps, but the reasons behind them, so you can handle the version of the problem that's actually in your house. If that helps you, hit subscribe. The next one will save you a headache too.